So we look at this report, and it says that over a third of the respondents are planning to put more resources into exporting to European markets over the next 5 years. Driven by optimism for growth or fear for being left behind? Adam, good morning.
I think driven, Manus, by real trade conditions. If you've got companies saying this is a key growth market for them, it remains a key export market for them, and they see some potential changes to their trading conditions in that market, actually a lot of them want to secure what they've already got and find new opportunities as well. So we are seeing more companies saying to us that they want to put more into Europe. It sort of goes against some of the conventional wisdom which would suggest companies would be moving elsewhere.
And what's the reaction that you've seen to the fairly substantial disclosures we've had now from Theresa May and the government about what they want? What do BCC members make of what Theresa May said over the last week or so about not staying in the single market and substantial changes to the customs union?
Well, of course, this survey was done in December, so it was before the Prime Minister's big speech over at Lancaster House. But I think businesses are pretty sanguine. They actually don't spend that much time poring over the details of some of the political pronouncements. Those who are likely to be directly affected have already been scenario planning, already been thinking about what they do next. And those who are only indirectly affected are saying they'll take it as it comes and respond as they need to. So quite a lot of companies just getting on with business, funnily enough, rather than starting to look at alternative scenarios.
Do you think, the one number that caught my eye, I was chatting to Anna this morning, is the 15% of the survey that said that they're now interested in sourcing more internationally. So this is business, whatever the outcome of Brexit, whatever the outcome of our participation in the single market in whatever form it comes, businesses are expedient. They're looking at other sources. Is that the number that I want to keep an eye on in terms of their interest in sourcing elsewhere?
Well, I think there's two numbers in there that are of great interest. One is that 15% saying they're looking internationally to source more for their businesses. The other, on the flip side, is the 13% who are looking to say that they're sourcing less from overseas markets and from the European market as well.
Because of the pound?
Because of the pound. A lot of businesses are starting to take a first look at whether they can get things from cheaper markets overseas, or indeed whether they can get them here in the UK because of the pound.
So you say that businesses, you often tell us that businesses, they just want to get on with business despite the politics, and we understand that. I mean, are we in danger of making too much of free trade conversations? I was reminded of this when we were looking at the impact of the NAFTA deal on the US economy and the substantial size of the Chinese-US relationship, even absent any kind of free trade arrangement. That didn't stop that kind of trade relationship from developing. Do businesses tell you they care very much about the detail of the trade deal that we get with Europe, or do they say, look, we're just going to get on with things regardless of what that trade deal looks like?
I think they're going to get on with things no matter what happens. That's certainly the case, and that's very much the message I get from business communities around the UK. Of course, they want a good trade deal with the European Union. They want the best possible terms of trade that we can get with the European Union for the future. But for a lot of businesses, all of this talk of free trade agreements really doesn't touch the sides, because actually they're already working in markets where there might not be a trade agreement in place, or markets where they don't have some of those advantageous forms of treatment.
But if you have substantial links to the continent right now, and you are assuming free movement of various supplies coming into your supply chain, and then you find we're outside the customs union, and all of a sudden all the stuff you import gets held up at the border for days, or longer, whilst various forms are filled in and customs procedures are followed, that is going to make a substantial difference to a lot of businesses.
Of course it will. And those firms, as I said, who are directly affected by those changes are already planning for what they do next. Some are shortening supply chains, some are simplifying origin of their goods and services in case origin becomes a key issue for the future. We're seeing all sorts of different reactions across the business community, from no reaction through to very, very serious changes to the way they operate. So there's a real mix out there, and I think liberalisation of overseas markets rather than free trade agreements for a lot of these businesses is very important. So if a third country says we're going to make doing business easier, that's often more important than bilateral agreements.
I mean, if you take the bankers as it is a separate issue in terms of having passporting, potentially losing passporting and migrating their business to other centres, you talk about some big serious decisions. What kind of businesses are making big serious decisions that have got ramifications for UK PLC, for the growth of this economy that you're talking to?
Well, one sector would be the manufacturing sector, of course. Whilst only around 10% of UK GDP, it's still nearly half of UK exports, so it's extremely significant in terms of value to the UK economy. And what a lot of manufacturers are saying is they are re-examining their supply chains. They are looking again at where they import from, where they export to, and looking at changes to strategy in order to deal with the change that is likely to come.
What could we get from a U.S.-UK trade deal that would appeal to your members? Is it all around freedom of movement? Is it around access to talent to, in some way, compensate for a lesser level of access to the EU, perhaps?
Well, I think businesses would love to see greater flows of trade between the UK and the USA. Bearing in mind that 20% of UK exports already go to the USA, that flow of trade is already really, really significant, even in the absence of a free trade deal. I think we have to be careful and look at this carefully. It's not necessarily an unfettered good, a free trade deal. There'll be a heck of a lot of competition that would come in the way of many UK businesses, and indeed in the opposite direction for many US businesses in the event of lowering of barriers to trade, with Mr. Trump's government saying that they will look very carefully at the interests of US businesses and the US economy. I think businesses here would expect the UK government to do the same as those conversations progress.
When you hear Switzerland saying they want to have as good a deal with the United Kingdom as currently exists in the current structures, the USA, we saw the pictures go global, and Turkey. So there are those people who want deals with the UK. Does that shift the onus on Europe, do you think, in the medium term? To do a decent deal?
I think it's in the interests of European business communities. When I talk to my colleagues in European business all across the continent, they want to see great terms of trade between the UK and the 27 for the future as well. And I think it's up to us collectively to put pressure on national governments on all sides to say, actually, this is what we want in future, because business wants to continue to trade. They want to do so in as unfettered a way as possible.